Attention startup leaders. Are you strapped for time but hungry for strategic insights? Introducing Managed Chaos, your go-to podcast for navigating the startup world in less time than your morning commute. Join us as we share expert advice, real-world examples, and actionable strategies to help you scale your business, allocate resources effectively, and achieve visionary results. Tune into Managed Chaos and join a community of like-minded innovators on the path to entrepreneurial success.
Hiring is the ever-growing, pressing question for businesses looking to grow quickly. How do you know when it's time to hire? And if you are hiring, should you bring on someone full-time or a contractor? Welcome to Managed Chaos Podcast, where we give you the startup business rundown in less time than it takes for you to get to work. I'm Katrina Purcell.
And I'm Rachel Anderson.
And today we're going to talk about hiring. All right, Rachel, what should I look for when I'm hiring?
So this is a question that I get asked all the time. It's when do I hire? How do I know who to hire? What am I looking for? And so I think let's break it down. First of all, there is no perfect formula. There's so many different things that you can actually look for to know if now's the right time to hire. And I do have a tip on that I'll give you in a second. But I think one of the best places to start is when you think there might be an opportunity for you to hire, or you might be ready. Here are the things that you really need to think about to know for sure if you're ready. So first is, do you have a defined duration for that work? And that can also help you determine some of the other questions that we'll ask, like if it should be a full-time person or outsourced. But what is that duration of work? Is this something that is a project I'm working on? It's a campaign I want to launch. It's a product that I want to go live. Yes, that product might take 2 years, but eventually it'll be live. And so you might need someone else, right? So maybe that's a long-term contractor. But what is that duration of work? What is the skill set that they need? So is it specialized? Is it really nuanced? Is it something that we will need ongoing each day, each hour? What are the specific skills that they need? And this, I would say, even is not like preferences, but what are the actual things that they need to know how to do? And I just want to plug for a second. I'm a huge, huge advocate for hiring people that you think can learn. So really understand if this is a skill set required to do the minimum part of the job, or if this is a skill set that you're asking for because you don't want to teach them. And those are not bad, either way to go. But I think it's good because sometimes we overestimate how much skill someone needs before we put that hiring rec together. And then finally, I would say the things you look for when hiring is what is the budget and resources available. So yes, that is money. That is time, that is, effort, HR people, executives, etc. But it's also who's going to train them. We recorded an episode about culture fit, and we talked a little bit about that onboarding process. And that is, in fact, part of this. There is a time cost, a resource cost to also getting someone hired full time. So do you know what that is, and have you prepared for it? So with all of those things, I would say that the most important thing is timing. You do not want to be hiring someone when you're already desperate, because then you tend to make different decisions than if you had plenty of time to take that into account and really think things through. So personally, I like to advise taking an 80-20 rule, which actually comes from my world of commercial real estate. I used to work for a team, a tech company that had a real estate department, and they use this to know when was the right time to expand or do other real estate acquisitions in order to make sure that their employees had enough space in the building. They would say, if we're at 80% capacity, then it's time, because in that 20% left, that's the time it will take us to get more. And so I have seen that reflected so frequently in the companies I've worked with, in my own teams, that when an employee gets to 80% capacity, you only have that 20% more before they're over capacity. And then that's burnout. That's other projects that can't be taken on. That's shifting priorities. So I like to have that same sort of 80-20 split applied to hiring. Is this the right time? Is somebody else already at 80%? Is the project itself going to be an 80% full and I need more resources or availability? It's a great metric to start with.
I love that you mentioned the skills aspect of it, because I think sometimes we think, well, we just need an extra set of hands. We just need another person. In some cases, you're just throwing an extra set of hands at a problem that actually needed something, different, right? It needed either a specific set of skills. Maybe it needed more than one set of hands. Maybe there were some prerequisites to actually helping those people to be successful. So starting with the skills that you actually need is just so important.
That's absolutely right. I ironically was talking to someone about 2 hours ago. He's a director in a marketing role, and he had hired someone and they did not fit for what he needed them to do. And so unfortunately they had to part ways. And what he realized in that is that he actually needed to hire someone completely different. It wasn't even the right role that he had hired for. And so I think that exact thing, like if you really sit down and think about what's the skill, then it could completely change what you think you might need to get that quote unquote second set of hands in.
Exactly. You already started talking about this a little bit, but let's dig more into hiring full-time versus a contractor or, outsourcing.
Yeah. So both of these are really, really good options. And I know a lot of teams, a lot of organizations think of one as being like better than the other, and it's just not true. So let me say maybe the top few things for each one that you might want to look at. So if you're looking internally, so you want to hire a full-time person, you want them on your team, in your company, with your culture, then there are some advantages with them having deep organizational knowledge. They're going to become intimate with your company, with your culture, with your products. They're going to be the foremost experts in those roles. And sometimes that's what you need. When I think about some things in marketing, some things in sales, especially things in product, having that deep understanding of what's happening can really aid in roadmap planning, in problem solving, in growth and expansion, and even just being able to help other people do their jobs. So that can be really critical. It also can really help with employee retention and morale. As you grow, people seeing that there's opportunities to expand inside, and even that other people are coming on. That's an amazing kind of flag that the company is healthy and thriving and valuing the individual there, which I think is not to be undersold sometimes when you're talking really about internal people. And then finally, there is a cost and time efficiency. There's a value to having someone full-time on your team that can jump in at any moment, that already knows the background of what's happening. You don't have to explain anything. You don't have to write a pitch. You don't have to find the right person to outsource. There's like a lower entry to getting something done often. And I think that that's really important too. So I would say when you're thinking about hiring full-time, with some of those other metrics, like, do I have enough work for a person full-time? Is there an ongoing need for that person? Some of those other things we just talked about. I think those are some other things to consider when you think internal hire full-time versus contractor. But that's not always true. So on the flip side, externally, you're going to have access to a lot of fresh ideas and perspectives. Mm-hmm. There's going to be new things bringing to the table and people that could be an expertise in a very specialized area, which brings me to the second thing, which is actual skills and expertise. You don't necessarily want to always hire to learn. If you have a sales role open, a leadership sales role open, you probably don't want to teach them how to do sales. No, you need them to know exactly the industry. You need to know the size of the company. You need to know the customer. You need to know how to do the job, or at least some combination of those things, because a lot of those skills are transferable. Same with marketing. So that's where, having that long-term expertise is not always best to outsource. Sometimes, or not always best to have internal. Sometimes it is good to outsource because you can have it much, much more nuanced than if you hire someone full-time. And that could even be a time constraint, right? I want someone that this really specific expertise for only 1 year or for a 6-month period of time to get us to a certain place. And then finally, I would say there is also an opportunity for quick scaling and flexibility. So there's a quickness to accomplishment of task or project, potentially if you have an internal person or a full-time person. But when you need to grow rapidly, or if you need to be really flexible in the type of projects that you hand out, having a valuable external partner is invaluable. I have several that I bring with me place to place to place because we have such curated trust, and I know exactly that they'll be able to do a wide variety of things in a really short amount of time. And I would not replace those relationships for anything. So really, when you think about hire internal or external, you really want to consider some of these different complexities about which one fits for the moment. And it doesn't always have to be the same answer.
And I think when you start to think about hiring a full-time employee, there's the additional cost there of benefits, of, providing them with extra resources that you provide your full-time employees, which you wouldn't necessarily provide a contractor, even payroll taxes and things like that, right? Running payroll. So that in the early days, it might actually be much better to augment your team with contractors. The other piece, which is a flavor, I guess, of contracting, is fractional work, which is what you and I both do. And I think it's sort of in between. And so the goal really there is that you're getting a fraction of the work done, right? So you're picking out what part of being a COO or what part of being a CMO you need currently, because you probably don't need the full-time role. And then you find someone who has the skills that kind of align with that. And you're paying a lot less than you would if you were getting those skills full-time. Right. But you're getting them to the point where you can execute on the projects you're trying to execute on, or build the strategic roadmap that you want to build. And I think it provides a lot of flexibility both for the fractional and the company, because you're not bringing that talent in-house and then kind of having them do things that are not in their wheelhouse, or having them spend time on stuff that isn't worth the money on or investment on your part.
That's right. There's a huge overhead cost to bringing in employees internally, and also in time and effort to have an outsourced person fully, like a contractor. Hiring internally is 75% to 150% of that person's salary to get them on board. That alone is an incredible cost to the business, not to mention all the things that you talked about, which is an ongoing cost to maintain that employee. And again, I want to say sometimes those costs are worth it. Mm-hmm. But if you have this in-between need where you need someone to act like a full-time employee, but have the expertise, the specialization of skill, the understanding for a particular moment of the life of a business or a goal, a fractional is a great choice. And I just usually call them part-time executives, right? Like, it's someone who's here temporarily that can aid in this specific moment, and then you can figure out what comes next. So I think that that's a great point to add in there, is that there is sometimes that middle ground. And selfishly, I'm going to plug fractionals are great.
So what are the key steps that we have to take in order to make sure that we actually hire well?
Yeah. This one I thought about for quite a while, because, there's so many different ways to hire, and there's so many different types of outcomes that you can have in hiring. But I think in general, the most important thing is probably to know what you want to accomplish before you start. And we talked about some of this, and so I'm really doubling down on this as an important key step. But you want to make sure you have a very clear job description. You want to have a very clear person that is managing that individual. You want to know exactly how you're going to onboard them. You want to know that they're a good culture fit. So basically, you need extreme clarity. From a personal perspective, I 100% have walked into a job before. This was many years ago. And on my first day, I couldn't figure out who my manager was, nor could the person that greeted me at reception. And so I literally sat in a chair for 2 hours and just waited for someone to acknowledge me, right? Think about that from like a hiring perspective.
That's so bad.
So bad. I know. The company clearly had a need, but like, they couldn't tell me what I was supposed to work on. They couldn't tell me who was supposed to give me instructions. They couldn't even give me a laptop that worked. So when I say I sat in a chair, I literally mean I sat in a chair. And so those are all impressions that your brand is leaving on an individual. And if I hadn't already been contract, so I knew that like I could maintain and figure this out over a short period of time if I wanted to stay longer, et cetera, I would have expected that new individual to leave. I would have expected them to say, this is not the company I want to be at, because they don't care about people. So anyway, I think having that established in advance is really important. You need real clarity. And then after that, I think when you're hiring, having some sort of skill assessment is incredibly helpful. It really helps you separate what you're assuming to be true about someone based on what you're reading or hearing, because we all have our own bias, right? If I say blue, you think navy, but I might think baby blue. So we're getting past that bias piece, and we're really talking more about like, okay, so what does it actually mean for this? And I've seen a lot of success in that. I once hired, one of my favorite hires was a book jacket designer for an enterprise graphic designer role. And because we did a skill assessment, I was able to see that she had an incredible eye and a unique perspective that we didn't have. And it became beautiful campaigns, great creative. Our customers really connected with that. And that wouldn't have been possible if I hadn't seen that skill assessment, right? Those things just don't really translate over. And then finally, because I know, I'm getting long-winded here, but I think it's important, as hard as it is to say this as a leader, that you should hire fast and fire fast. It's really important to acknowledge your mistakes, and really important to know that it is a real culture killer, which you said in a previous podcast. If you don't pay attention to the way that people are able to influence your team or even the tasks that they're assigned. So having that be a skill that you develop is, I think, really caring and compassionate to all people, even the person that you have to say, hey, we made a mistake. This isn't working.
I agree. I also love the comment on assessments. I've instituted them at a couple of clients. It helps to level the playing field, and it also provides you the ability to sort of see how someone strategically thinks or how they might approach their work. This has been another really informative episode of Managed Chaos Podcast. You can find us on all of your favorite podcast apps, and we look forward to seeing you again on the next episode.
This was another informative episode of Managed Chaos, the podcast for startups. You can find us on all of your favorite podcasting apps, as well as on Instagram and YouTube, where we are at Managed Chaos Podcast. For additional resources or to continue the conversation, you can find Katrina Purcell and Rachel Anderson on LinkedIn.